So where I start when I go into a new organization is to think about your business first. What data do you have and why do you have it? So what information do you have across your organization? And thinking about how do you interact with customers as well. And this is one area where if you go and talk to your information security colleagues, a lot of information security departments, ones that have been around for a while, will have a pretty good understanding of what information is in your organization. What they've probably done is they've created a data classification standard. They will know where the sensitive information is. What we then need to do from a privacy perspective is to say, that's great that you know where the data is, but now what we need to think about is how are we using that data? Because increasingly describing how we use information is required to be included in your privacy notices that you'll put up on your website and share outside of your organization. In practice, the privacy notice you can think of as the law that you get to write yourself. And one of the things that I always say about, and again, not a lawyer, so I'm a little bit biased maybe in some respects, is that anyone who writes a privacy law doesn't understand your business. And you need to be thinking about that when you're reviewing privacy laws and legislation, is that no one's really thought about how that's going to apply to your organization. But with your privacy notice, what you do have the ability to do is to write that in a way that it sets a set of rules that you're committing to externally. And again, if I come back to the FTC, as I mentioned a second ago, if you say something in your privacy notice that turns out not to be true, the FTC can come after you just as if you broke any other law that a regulator would come after you for. So it's really important to get that right. You also need to understand, and I'm using these terms in more of the GDPR sense, data controller and data processor, that distinction doesn't exist in the US in the same way. But think about whether you have a direct relationship with the individuals whose data you hold, or whether you're handling that information on behalf of another entity. And some organizations, in fact, a lot of organizations, you will have both parts of this. You'll be a data controller in some places, both in some places, and then just a data processor maybe in some other areas, depending on your business model. I would also think seriously about whether, if you're a US company, are you a domestic US company, or are you one that's international? If we look at privacy laws around the world, and I don't know how many of you have looked at the proposed Brazilian law, which was supposed to come into effect soon, but it's now being pushed back to next year. The Brazilian law is, I would say, 80 to 90% the same as GDPR. They've really adopted a lot of the GDPR requirements. And we're seeing that around the world, is that a lot of organizations with new laws really have, they've taken GDPR, the European standard, as kind of their baseline. And one of the reasons for that is that GDPR has these cross-border requirements where if you're moving information out of Europe, one of the ways that you can do that legally is to move it to a country that has substantially similar laws to the European law. The US at the moment does not have that substantially similar designation. The way we would get around that is by using the Privacy Shield framework, which the US government agreed with the Europeans, or to use one of the other methods enumerated in GDPR, such as binding corporate rules. So I would always suggest that start with knowing the organization. And once you have a good sense of that, you can then think about what the next steps are with the right privacy program for your organization. So the way that I think about this is that a lot of people out there are really concerned about compliance. Board members are concerned because they have direct liability. Investors are concerned, they don't want to get a big fine or a lawsuit. They don't want to be in the press for the wrong reasons. So a lot of organizations, particularly those with less mature privacy programs, they really chase compliance. And I think of this like the hamster in the wheel, going round and round and never really getting anywhere. That's not to say that compliance isn't important, but when I look at these things, I think about maybe a slightly different approach. So what I'm trying to help organizations that I work with get to is this concept of privacy confidence, where I know what I need to do from a legal perspective, and I have a good story, a good approach for each major area. So when I think about my overall privacy program and someone says, hey, how do you do this? I can go through and say, this is what we do, this is why we do it, these are the major risks, this is the work that we're doing. That's not going to stop everything going wrong. Anyone that's worked in this field for a while knows that you can never stop a data breach from occurring, but you can reduce that risk and you can reduce the significance of something if it does go wrong. So when you're thinking about what your program should be focused on, compliance should be a part of it, but my advice would be that shouldn't be really where you stop. Think broader than that.